Snow slammed against the windows of Whitfield Manor like a living thing, howling, clawing, relentless. The storm warning had sounded dramatic when the meteorologist announced it earlier that afternoon. A historic blizzard, the kind that would shut down airports and collapse bar lanes. But Marcus Whitfield had barely listened. He'd been pacing the gleaming hospital corridors, gripping his phone in a hand slick with panic, waiting for news he was never prepared for. Standing in his marble foyer with snow melting off his suit and crave tearing through him like shrapnel, the memory of that forecast felt cruel. His world had not collapsed because of the weather. Victory was gone. The words kept repeating, looping, refusing to settle. His wife, his brilliant, laughing, stubborn Victory, who had been complaining about swollen ankles and nursery painkillers just the day before, was dead. He didn't remember driving home. Didn't remember the red lights or the drifting snow or the moment he walked through the mansion door and dropped to his knees. All he knew is that now, with the storm howling and the house too silent, the phone pressed against his ear delivered the final blow. More, Whitfield, the doctor's voice cracked through static, strained and urgent. The twins are failing. The generators weren't holding. We're losing oxygen support. Marcus's heart slammed painfully against his ribs. Then intubate them. Do something. We're trying, but static swallowed the rest. Transport, NICU, critical. The line died. Marcus stared at the dead phone like he could will it back to life. A billionaire with influence bank countenance, a man whose company supplied medical software to the very hospital failing him, and he was powerless. Utterly, painfully powerless. Footsteps entered the silence. Sir? Rose's voice floated toward him, soft, unsure. She stood at the doorway to the kitchen, a dish towel in her hands as if she'd simply paused mid-routine. She was small, hardly imposing, someone who folded linens and polished crystal without ever being truly seen. Now her eyes found his face, cold, broke, raw, and widened. What has happened? It took 3 trees before he could speak. Victory is dead. The words cut him as they left his mouth. The babies, they're dying too. Her breath hitched, but there was no gasp, no panic. Instead, she moved closer, steady, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Where are they now? The hospital. But the bar, there was a cowl, they can't, his words fractured in their crave. Rosie went still, listening not just to his voice, but to the silence around him. Then, faintly, over the wind, came a sound neither of them expected. Sirens. Crowing louder. Fighting the storm. Rose's eyes sharpened, not with shock, but calculation. They're bringing them here, she murmured, half to herself. They must have nowhere else. The ambulance lurched into the circular drive moments later, red and blue lights splashing across the manor's cats, the snow, Marcus's Standex brush. 2 paramedics burst through the door carrying equipment and 2 impossibly tiny bundles inside clear transport incubators. We couldn't keep them at the hospital, one shouted. Generators were failing. This was the closest bird location on record. Marcus's mouth opened to protest. He didn't know how to save a child, let alone 2, but Rose's voice sliced through the chaos. Put them on the table, she commanded. The tone was unmistakable, authoritative, practiced, unyielding. The paramedics obeyed. Maurkice stirred. Rosie was already snapping open latches, shaking vitals, adjusting oxygen lines with speed and precision. Her voice was low, focused, steady, not the voice of a housekeeper. A more Whitfield. Taz. Warm wind. Move. He stumbled backward, ebbing without thought. When he returned, Rosie had one of the babies in her hands, so fragile, so tiny he could see the miracles and failures of the human body written in that translucent skin. She rubbed the infant's back in a firm rhythm, whispering soft Spanish encouragements. The baby cast it, a thin, desperate cry filling the room like selfish. Maurkice froze. For the first time since this nightmare began, hope flickered. Not because of doctors. Not because of wealth. But because the woman had barely spoken to in 19 years was saving his children with knowledge she had never revealed. And as the snowstorm raged outside, Maurkice realized the world hadn't just broke, it had shifted. And Rosie Martinez was not who he thought she was. The storm hadn't eased, it had grown wild, primal, shrieking against the windows as if trying to claw its way inside. The manor's chandeliers trembled with each distant boom of thunder, a natural sound in a blizzard that made the walls themselves seem nervous. Maurkice stood froze, his shirt half unbuttoned, the warmth of his sun against his bare chest anchoring him to reality. The baby's breaths were shallow, fragile things, soft cusps that never felt currented. Every rise of that tiny chest was a victory. Every buzz was terror. Rosie moved around the dining room with calm that bordered ornery, transforming a polished mahogany and imported linen into a battlefield hospital. Space heaters cloud beside crystal decanters and antique faces shade chef decide without hesitation. Medical equipment hummed softly, a stark contrast to the wind beating against the manche. No one spoke. Then Ethan, the infant in Maurkice's arms, went silent. Completely silent. Maurkice's heart stopped. Rose, his note. I know, she said sharply. In 3 steps she was beside him. Give him to me. Nah. Maurkice hesitated only a second before placing his son in her hands. Rosie lifted the tiny body, her fingers steady, her eyes focused with frightening intensity. She tilted his head, adjusted the oxygen tube, and then began a series of movements, firm yet delicate taps along the spine, feather-light compressions along the ribs, a maneuver Maurkice didn't recognize. Come on, Bikwe now, she whispered. Don't stop now. You're not finished. No response. Maurkice felt the air leave his lungs. He took a step back, pressing himself on the edge of the table. Tears buried his face. Not again, not another death, not tonight. Then, in impossibly small, broken sound. A cry. Weak, but real. Maurkice dropped his head, breath shaking, relief crashing through him so hard he nearly crumbled to the floor. Rosie blessed Ethan back against his chest. He needs to value. Talk to him. Speak life into him. Maurkice nodded, clutching the baby close. You're strong, he whispered against the diny hair. Stronger than me. Stronger than the storm. I'm here. I won't let go. Rose turned to him, his daughter, shaking her vitals with practiced movements. The girl was breathing steadily, but her oxygen saturation numbers flickered dangerously. Rose adjusted again, murmuring under her breath in Spanish, something soft, something ancient, bolt lullaby, bolt brar. Thunder bombed again, closer. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. Maurkis stiffened. If the bar goes. Rosie didn't look up. Then I will keep them alive by hand. It wasn't confidence. It was Eva. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Maurkis turned sharply, half expecting another paramedic, or Shen, or the storm itself mid-flash. Instead, it was his mother. Eleanor Whitfield stood at the threshold, wrapped in a fur coat despite being indoors, her hair perfect, her expression unreadable. She stopped when she saw the scene, the babies, the medical chaos, Rose standing like a general in a war zone. What is the meaning of this? Eleanor's voice was low and cold, cutting through the room. Maurkis swallowed hard. There was no choice. The hospital, Victory, she. I know, she interrupted, voice cracking just once before she forced composure back into place. The lawyers called me. Harkes slid to Rose, assessing, calculating. And what, she asked softly, is she doing? Rosie didn't answer. She didn't even look up. She simply continued working. Something flashed in Eleanor's eyes, not surprise, not confusion. Recognition. And fear. Maurkis saw it, and something inside him shifted. What do you know about her? He demanded. Eleanor stiffened. Maurkis, this is not the time. No. Right now is the only time. Because this womb, this housekeeper, is the reason your grandchildren are still alive. Rosie finally lifted her head. Her dark eyes met Eleanor's, and Maurkis realized this wasn't their first encounter. Eleanor took a slow breath. Maurkis, there are things your father never intended you to know. Another crash of thunder shook the class. The lights flickered again. Then died. Darkness swallowed the house. Em whimpered. Ethan stirred. And Rose's voice, calm, certain, commanding, cut through the void. Everyone stay still. A bit. Her tone sharpened. We are not done fighting. The storm held. The house trembled. And in the darkness, Maurkis Whitfield understood one terrifying truth. He no longer knew who Rosie Martinez truly was. But tonight, she was the only person standing between his children and death. Darkness braced against the walls of Whitfield Manor like a living beast. The barrage wasn't a flicker this time, it was complete. The chandeliers, the sconces, the silent claw of the space haters, all vanished into blackness. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rose's voice rose, not loud, but steady enough to anchor the room. Maurkis. Do not panic. Keep your sun against your skin and listen to my voice. Maurkis tightened his arms around Ethan, instinct kicking in where logic failed. The baby's warmth felt impossibly small, like holding a flame that could be sniffed at by a breath. Amy let at a whimper from the table. Rosie navigated through the dark with unnerving certainty. Matches. Flashlights. Candles. Anything you can find. Nah. Marcus turned blindly, adrenaline propelling him. His feet hit furniture, marble, walls, but he kept moving until his fingers brushed a drawer near the butler's pantry. He tore it up, rummaging through all the silver polish, batteries, forgotten receipts. His hand closed around a flashlight. Click. A beam cut through the black, a wake, trembling cylinder of light, but enough to reveal Rose bent protectively over him, her hands moving with impossible precision even without full visibility. Eleanor stood frozen at the entrance, pale as scalded ivory. Marcus forced breath back into his lungs and moved toward the dining table. He passed the flashlight to Rose wordlessly. She didn't thank him. She didn't need it. The acknowledgement left in her controlled exhale. We need hate, she murmured. Premature babies cannot regulate temperature. Without these space haters. She trailed off. Marcus didn't ask what happened without them, he could already feel the cold bleeding into the room. The storm rattled the windows, forcing drafts through every crevice. Rose adjusted his oxygen tube, her eyes narrowing. Her levels are dropping. She's fighting the flow. Marcus leaned forward, fear cowling in his chest. What do you need? Rose looked up, and something in her gaze pierced him. Resolve. Anne gave. I need you, she said quietly, to trust me more than you trust your fear. He nodded. Code, she whispered. Then we begin. She lifted him carefully from the table and placed the tiny curl into Marcus's other arm. You will hold both until I can create something better. Kicked them skin to skin. They must hear your heartbeat. Just like before. Keep talking. Your voice steadies their breathing. Marcus swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. Then speak truth, Rose murmured. Even if it breaks you. He nodded and held his children as though he were holding the fragile core of existence itself. He lowered his voice to a trembling whisper. Your mother left you, he said, breath enough. She named you before we know you. She believed you would change the world. Ethan stirred. Amy's tiny fingers flexed. Rose exhaled, relief flickering in her eyes before she turned to Eleanor. You, she said, not politely, not deferentially. Like a command. Go to the basement. There should be emergency generators from the renovation 5 years ago. Eleanor stiffened. You don't give orders in this house. Rose stepped closer. For 19 years, I scrubbed flowers and washed linens and pretended to belong in silence. But tonight, she said softly, dangerously, I am the only person who knows how to keep these children alive. So yes, Maurice Whitfield. Here is hardened. I do. A long, icy moment stretched between them. Then Eleanor turned and left, silent, rigid. Marcus watched her cow stand. Rose, he whispered, how did you know about the generators? Her hands paused only briefly as she adjusted the tubing and blankets. Because I know this house better than anyone, she answered. Even you. She walked to the file cabinet, pulled open drawers, touched objects like she could see through darkness with her fingertips. Your father used to hide files in here, she murmured almost absently. Documents. Contacts. Things he didn't want anyone to find. Marcus's bills quickened. What kind of files? Rosie didn't look at him at first. She found medical tape, scissors, A-class drawer, items she was repurposing without hesitation. Only after a moment did she speak. The kind that cost people their careers, she said softly. Their futures. A shadow moved across her face. The kind that cost people their children. Marcus froze. What were you saying? Rosie didn't answer. Not yet. She placed both hands on the table to steady herself, as though bracing against memories she had spent years burying. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but rather sharp. There are truths in this house that were said long before you were old enough to walk, she whispered. Truths your father swore would never come too late. She finally looked up at him, and there was something ancient and wounded in her eyes. But tonight, she said, her voice trembling with something between fury and fat. Those truths are coming home. The storm screamed against the windows. Somewhere deep in the mansion, machinery hummed. Eleanor had found the generator. Lights flickered, dim, unreliable, but enough to reveal Marcus holding his children, Rosie standing cowed, and the sense that the world had shifted. Not by death, but by revelation. And the night wasn't finished. Not even close. The backup bars battered to life with a hollow electrical hum, like a beast waking after years of neglect. Dim emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the ornate room. It wasn't enough light to feel safe, but it was enough to see everything more clearly. Marcus held both infants close, their tiny paws pressed against his skin. His arms ached, his back burned, but he refused to loosen his grip. Every breath the twins took felt counted, borrowed time. Rosie scanned their faces, checking their color, adjusting the blankets and oxygen flow with delicate precision. She paused next over him, her jaw tightening. Marcus saw the moment she masked concern with control. She didn't want him to say it, but he did. What's wrong? His voice trembled. Rosie didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed her hand over his chest, counting her breaths with her fingertips. Her oxygen saturation is unstable, she finally murmured. The storm must have damaged the oxygen regulators in the incubators. We'll need a stronger source or a replacement soon. Marcus swallowed hard. How long do we have? Rosie met his gaze. Not long enough. The words hit like stones. Before Marcus could respond, footsteps returned, Eleanor reappearing from the hallway, her gloves removed, her face flushed from exertion and something else. Fear. The generators are old, she announced. They weren't maintained. If the storm takes down more lines, we lose them too. Rosie nodded without surprise. We plan for failure, then. Eleanor bristled. You speak as if catastrophe is expected. Rosie turned slowly toward her. With this family, she whispered. It always is. Something electric passed between them, years of silence, secrets, resentment compressed into one thin, charged moment. Marcus's voice broke the tension. You said earlier, there were files. Secrets my father hid. He shifted the twins carefully, his brother Tate. What did you mean? Rose's ease softened, not with gentleness, but with exhaustion. The kind carried for years by someone who has waited far too long to speak. It's time, she murmured. You deserve to know. Eleanor stepped forward sharply. No. He doesn't. Marcus stared at her, stunned. Mother? But Eleanor's voice rose, not icy this time, but frantic. Marcus, listen to me. Your father made mistakes, terrible ones. But reopening those wounds will not help your children. Rosie let out a breath that could have been a laugh, if laughter could bleed. Help, she echoed. You think the truth harms them? The truth might save them. Eleanor froze. Marcus's blood turned cold. Save them? From what? Rosie walked toward a tall, carved cabinet Marcus had never bothered to open. She bubbled at the door, locked. Without hesitation, she grabbed the metal scissors from the table and jammed them into the lock, twisting, forcing. The metal scratched in protest, and then cave. The cabinet door swung open. Inside were stacks of files, yellowed, brittle, labeled in neat handwriting. Some medical. Some legal. Some marked confidential. Rosie scanned them with a trembling hand, pulling at a thin folder with a single name. Whitfield Research Initiative, Neonatal Defage. Another. Martinez, Rose, Trial Sample. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. That's your name, he whispered. Rosie lifted the file slowly, as though it weighed more than paper. Yes, she murmured. And there's more. She pulled a smaller envelope from the back, sealed with an old wax stamp bearing the Whitfield crest. Marcus stared as she placed it in his palm. His pulse hammered. Open it, Rosie said. Eleanor's voice sliced through the room. Marcus, don't. But something in Rose's expression, bleeding, haunted, left no room for hesitation. Marcus broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A lab report. His breath caught as he read the first line. Genetic match confirmed 99.98%. He scanned further. Below Rose's name. Subject father, Robert Whitfield Resaur. Subject mother, Rosie Martinez. The word went silent, not just quiet, but hollow. Marcus stared, not at the paper, but at the woman standing before him. You were pregnant, he whispered. With his child. Rosie nodded, slow, devastating. Marcus's voice cracked. And the file, trial sample, what does that mean? Rose's eyes shimmered, not with weakness, but with fire. It means, she said softly, that Robert Whitfield didn't just abandon me. She stepped closer. He used me. Silence struck like lightning. Eleanor closed her eyes, as though bracing for impact. Marcus's voice scraped from somewhere raw. What happened to the baby? Rose's breath shook, crave flickering across her face like a candle in wind. She didn't die naturally, she whispered. Your father made sure of that. Marcus staggered back, his grip tightening protectively around the twins. But why? He choked at. Why would he? Rosie looked at him, not with anger, but with unbearable sorrow. Because my research, she breathed, produced premature infants who survived against impossible odds. Babies like your twins. Marcus blinked, realization striking him like a blood. My children. Rosie nodded. They were born into a galaxy no one was meant to repeat. At sea, thunder shattered the sky. Inside, Marcus Whitfield felt the foundation of his identity collapse. And in his arms, two tiny lives, descendants of secrets, fought to breathe in a world built on lies. The storm raged like a warning outside, slamming against Whitfield Manor with primal fury. Lightning carved brave white flashes through the windows, illuminating the room in fractured glimpses. Marcus holding his newborns like fragile trolls, Rosie standing beside the opened cabinet of secrets, and Eleanor froze with her hanged breast over her mouth as if she could hold back everything she'd buried. No one spoke. The only sounds were the machine's faint hum, the storm's relentless roar, and the delicate, uneven breaths of the babies, breaths that might stop at any second. Marcus finally found his voice, raw and cracking. You're telling me my father experimented on premature infants? His gaze lifted, first to the files, then to Rose. And he experimented on your child. Rosie didn't look away. Not just mine. Marcus's stomach dropped. What do you mean? She motioned toward the files in the cabinet. Your father's research was global. Hospitals in Mexico, South Africa, India, places with underserved neonatal wards. Her face trembled, not with fear, but with rage controlled so tightly it was nearly shaking her report. He offered funding. Equipment. Supplies. Marcus swallowed. In exchange for patients. Yes, she whispered. The most fragile. The least defended. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Rose's face, the grief etched in every line. My daughter was one of many. Silence swallowed the room. Marcus felt his throat close, breath burning. Eleanor finally stepped forward, voice strained. Marcus, your father wasn't a monster. Rose turned sharply, is blazing. No? Then what do you call a man who used dying infants to test longevity technology? Who erased records? Silenced nests? Destroyed families to protect a galaxy? Eleanor flinched, not defensively, but as someone who has heard these accusations before. You know, Marcus whispered. Eleanor's lips trembled. Not everything. She closed her eyes, voice cracking. But I know enough. A sound tore from Marcus, both disbelief, both betrayal. The room felt smaller, earthening. My whole life, he whispered, you let me believe he was a hero. He was your father, Eleanor said softly. You worshipped him. I wanted to protect that. Lightning struck again, this time close enough to rattle the windows. Rose looked between mother and son, her expression softening, not with sympathy, but a weariness born from decades of silence. Marcus, she said gently, I didn't come here to punish you. Or even your mother. She stepped closer, her voice barely more than breath. I came because I couldn't watch another Whitfield child die. Marcus stiffened. What do you mean another? Rose reached for another file, the paper brittle with edge. The name on the tab made Marcus's blood run cold. Whitfield infant, Cas 7B. His pigeon bird. There was another baby, Rosie said softly. Before you were born. A brother. Eleanor pressed her hand against the table to steady herself. He survived longer than anyone expected, Rosie continued. Nearly 6 weeks. They said it was a miracle. Her voice broke. But the research was experimental. Incomplete. He died in the night. Marcus's hands tightened instinctively around his shoulder. I never know, he whispered. You weren't meant to. Eleanor's voice was barely audible. Your father destroyed every document that proved he existed, not out of cruelty but shame. He believed he could fix what he broke. You were supposed to be proof of that. Marcus's breath shook, not with grief alone, but with fury. Anna, my children, he murmured, voice raw, or born into that same nightmare. Rose stepped close, so close her voice felt like if I whispered against bone. No. Not if we fight. Not if we break the cycle. Emma stirred weakly, her breathing suddenly shallow again. Rose moved fast, adjusting the oxygen, cradling her with practiced urgency. She's losing heat, Rosie murmured. Her body is shutting down. We're out of time. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. Tell me what to do. Rosie lifted her gaze, dark, steady, and unyielding. We need warmth. Consistent warmth. Marcus nodded, already moving. I'll start the fear bless. No, Rose interrupted. Not just hate. Her voice dropped, threaded with something ancient and instinctive. She needs your heartbeat. Your scent. Your skin. Marcus froze. Both of them, Rosie finished softly. You must hold both, together. Marcus hesitated only a breath before lowering himself into the antique leather chair beside the table. He adjusted blankets, oxygen tubing, trembling but determined. Rosie blessed him against his other shoulder. Talk to them, she whispered. Marcus held both children against his chest, his heart beating for all three. He closed his eyes and whispered, You're not alone. I'm here. I won't let history repeat. Rosie watched him, something shifting in her expression. Not just hope. Recognition. Lightning flashed a silver light catching on her tears. Because in that moment, Marcus Whitfield, Arthur, Lexi, and Liz finally looked like a father willing to burn the world to protect his children. And Rosie had waited 19 years to see that. The fire crackled after Marcus finally managed to coax it to life. The flames weren't just warmth, they were defense, the last barrier against a cold that seemed eager to claim what Fed hadn't already taken. The room glowed amber, shadows dancing across the walls, touching the portraits of Whitfield ancestors who stared down as if judging the unfolding reckoning. Marcus sat near the fire, his shirt open, both infants pressed against his bare skin. Their bodies were so tiny they seemed almost weightless, yet never in his life had he held anything with more reverence, or more fear. Ethan's breathing was steadier now, warm puffs against his father's chest. However, remained heartbreakingly quiet. Too still. Too fragile. Marcus whispered to them, promises, confessions, Fragments of memories he'd never spoken aloud. Note to his wife. Note to his mother. It was always business first, he murmured against his soft head. I thought I had time to learn how to be a father. I thought the slave you would wait for me. His voice cracked. I was wrong. He kissed the top of her tiny skull. Then, footsteps. Rose reappeared with blankets warmed by the fire and began tucking them carefully around the twins. She did not speak, her movements were steady, deliberate, sacred. When she finally lifted her gaze to Marcus, her expression carried something raw and ancient. This, she whispered, is what should have happened 19 years ago. Marcus didn't fully understand, not yet, but the weight of her words settled into the room like another presence. Eleanor stood across the table, wrapped in her fur coat though the fire blazed. She wasn't shivering from cold. Her trembling came from memory. Rose, she said softly, too softly. Why now? Why reveal all of this? You stayed silent all these years. You could have left. You could have destroyed us. Rosie looked at her, not with anger, but with a grave shower bent into purpose. I stayed, she murmured, because someone had to watch. Someone had to make sure history would not repeat. Marcus frowned. Repeat, huh? With my children? Rosie hesitated for the briefest second, barely a flicker, but enough. Marcus's blood ran cold. What weren't you telling me? Rose inhaled deeply, steadying herself. When the twins were transported here, she began slowly, I checked their vitals. Their neurological responses. Their blood oxygen patterns. She stepped closer, her voice low. And I saw something familiar. Marcus stiffened. Familiar, huh? Rose's expression was both awe and dread. They have the same biomarker signature my daughter had. The words hit like a physical strike. Eleanor gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Marcus blinked, confused and terrified. Biomarker? What does that mean? It means, Rosie said carefully, that your father's work didn't end when mine did. A chilling silence fell. Eleanor spoke first, voice thin. Marcus, your father believed premature infants were the next frontier of human development. That they were adaptable. That their bodies could survive radical interventions. Marcus stared at her, horrified. Mother. He claimed it was for medicine, she whispered. A breakthrough to save infants born orally. But there was something else. M3. Rosie finished it for her. That premature infants, if properly triggered, would evolve beyond ordinary human limitations. Lightning flashed, followed by a roll of thunder so violent the windows shook. Marcus processed the words slowly, as if his brain refused to accept them. You mean genetically engineered? No, Rosie whispered. Something worse. She moved closer to the firelight, her shadow long across the floorboards. Enhanced. Marcus shook his head. No. That's impossible. Illegal. Insa. Rose's eyes gleamed, not with triumph, but with devastation. And yet, she murmured, nodding to the children in his arms, here they are. I'm suddenly drugged, a tiny convulsion, her arms stiffening for a heartbeat before she relaxed again. Marcus's best spake. What was that? What happened? Rosie was instantly beside him, assessing, measuring, listening. Not a cigar, she breathed. A neutral response. Marcus stared at her. To what? To something inside her waking. Rosie lifted her eyes, and Marcus saw fear there for the first time. You children, she whispered, or not Diana. She placed a trembling hand against Amy's fragile back. They are transforming. Marcus felt the ground disappear beneath him. Thunder shook the America, but this time, there was something else beneath it. A vibration. A subtle hum. Electrical. The generator lights flickered and then steadied. The baby's oxygen monitors chimed, steadier than before. Amy breathed, not shallow, but deeper. Stronger. Rosie pressed her stethoscope to the tiny chest and froze. Her eyes filled, not with fear. With awe. It's happening faster than I expected, she breathed. Marcus stared at her, voice barely a whisper. What is? Rosie looked up. Her voice was reverent and terrified. The evolution your father always wanted. The fire crackled. Wind screamed outside. And somewhere deep beneath Whitfield Manor, a machine hummed. As if answering a signal. The house seemed to breathe. A low, rhythmic vibration burst through the floors, steady, unnatural, almost mechanical. The fire hissed, the storm roared, but beneath the towel, something alive was waking. Marcus held the twins closer, his heart pounding. Ethan stirred first, eyes fluttering hope, not unfocused like a newborn, but startlingly aware. His gaze fixed on the flares, tracking them. Following them. Amy followed moments after. When her eyes opened, Rose staggered back, not in fear, but in recognition so deep it shook her. Those eyes weren't just newborn blue. They were the exact same rare, storm-cradished Rose once saw in another infant. Her daughter. Eleanor sank into a chair, shaking her head. No. This can't be happening again. Marcus shot her a hard look. Mother, what aren't you telling me? What did father do? Eleanor pressed her shaking hands together. Your father believed premature infants or windows into a flush, biology still in motion. When Rosie discovered stabilization techniques that made those infants stronger, he pushed further. Rosie's voice getting quiet, haunted. He believed premature infants could adapt to survive anything. Disease. Climate. Even death. Marcus stared at her, horrified. You're telling me my children were, what, some kind of experiment? Rosie didn't flinch. No. I'm telling you they were born differently, because your father altered your family line long before you were conceived. Thunder crashed again, louder than before. A tremor rattled a fist off the mantel. It shattered across the floor. Marcus swallowed hard. Altered, huh? Rose stepped forward, voice trembling but sure. Your father wasn't just experimenting on premature infants. She looked eyes with Eleanor. He experimented on himself. Marcus froze. Eleanor shut her eyes as if pressing for a blow. Yes, she whispered. He injected stem cell modifications tested on Rose's research. He believed if he altered his reproductive DNA, his descendants would inherit what he failed to embody. Rose nodded slowly. He wanted the next Whitfield generation to be the first of something new. Marcus's legs went weak. So, my children. Our the final phase, Rose whispered. His perfected outcome. The babies shifted suddenly, simultaneously. Amy lifted her head. Ethan curled his fingers, not weak and searching, but intentional, gripping Marcus's shirt with impossible strength for a premature infant. Marcus stared, breath stolen from his lens. The machines monitoring their vitals but not frantically now, but in strong care rhythms. Rose pressed her stethoscope to Amy's chest, and her expression changed. Oh. Fear. A reference. Her heartbeat, Rose whispered. It's regulating, faster than medical science showed her. She's not feeling anymore. She's adapting. Amy blinked up at Rose, not vacant, not aimless, but as if she recognized her. So did Eth. Both babies turned their heads toward Rose at the same moment. Marcus felt a chill crawl up his spine. Eleanor whispered hoarsely, just like the first one. Rose's eyes burned. Yes, she murmured. Just like my daughter. Marcus lifted his head sharply. You said she died. Rose's expression hardened, not with bitterness, but with truth sharpened into a blade. No, she said softly. Your father told me she died. She stepped closer, not to Marcus, but to the babies. But the birthmark your children share, the biomarker signature, the neurological pattern. Her voice broke. It's her. The same traits. The same sequence. Marcus's breath shook. Are you saying my children, are somehow linked to her genetically? Rose looked at him slowly, like someone finally ready to speak a truth that had haunted her for 2 decades. No, she whispered. I am saying something else. Lightning flashed, bright enough to fill the room with white. Rose's eyes reflected it. Marcus? I believe one of your children is her. Silence slammed into the room. Marcus shook his head violently. That's impossible. Rose, my daughter was just born. This is a bird. But Rose's voice stayed steady, unwavering. Not reincarnation. Not fantasy. A scientific resurrection. Eleanor gasped. Marcus went still. Rose continued, voice trembling. Your father preserved my daughter's genome. He replicated her developmental pattern. Not to replace her. She looked down at baby M, who watched her with eerie stillness. But to finish what she began. Marcus stared at his daughter, really saw her, and his whole world tilted. Are you saying this? Rose nodded, tears finally breaking free. Yes. Am is my child's second life. Eleanor whispered, broke. The Whitfield there, and the stolen daughter. Marcus felt the ground disappear beneath him. He clutched his children tighter, not just as a father protecting them from death, but from the legacy awakening inside them. Rose stepped closer, laying a trembling hand on Emma's tiny back. Her voice dropped to info. This time, I will not let anyone take her from me. At Said, the storm reached its peak, wind screaming, thunder splitting the sky. In Said Whitfield Manor, 3 destinies collided. A billionaire. A reborn child. And a woman who had waited 19 years for justice. The babies, monitor baby ikan. Not weak. Not unstable. Steady. Strong. Effowing. Marcus closed his eyes. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about life, about science, had shattered. On the world that Said had no idea what had just been born in the middle of a blizzard.